Today, I'm going to talk about how I'm using artificial intelligence to perform sentiment analysis in some of our expert advisors. This video is sponsored by the Prosperity Algo Prompt Firm Bundle, a portfolio of 6 EAs designed to pass prompt firms and get consistent payouts. Click the link in the description to get a 1-week free trial. So one of the best applications of a real AI use case is to effectively crunch crazy amounts of data to determine a market bias. And specifically in this video, I'm going to discuss how we're using this with some of our Longbow expert advisors to perform sentiment analysis. So what is sentiment analysis? There's many definitions, but in this particular video, I will be discussing reading the news in regards to a particular asset class and then determining if the market is bullish or bearish based on that news. So a great example is, let's pick the NASDAQ for instance. If you were to just Google the NASDAQ, you would receive several different news articles which pop up in your feed. And then if you read these articles, typically there's some sort of bullish or bearish sentiment given the day. Like let's say a couple weeks ago when we had the Chinese, like the talks with the Chinese in the US, and everybody suddenly became very exuberantly bullish because they thought that a lot of the trade tension was behind us. During this time, much of the news just out in the media was extremely bullish. But then, for instance, last week, when there was a lot of discussions about Trump did a Truth Social in regards to putting a 50% tariff on the EU, then all of a sudden news became bearish. So if you read the general sentiment which is out there from the news, you can typically see a bullish or bearish kind of lean depending on the week. And the intent here is to be able to do this automatically in an expert advisor using artificial intelligence. So instead of us as the trader going out and skimming through tons of news articles to see what's going on, can we use a large language model to essentially go and scan the news and score the sentiment based on -10 to 10 and use that as a filter in our expert advisors? And for this experiment, and what I've been using is Perplexity. And Perplexity is a specific search large language model, which is really good because it can do live web searching. Many different large language models can't actively search, and you have to effectively use their chat user interface, not via the API, to be able to actually perform like a live web search. Perplexity, though, specializes in this, and that's why I chose to use it to actually go and be the backbone of this experiment. And it's really good because it acts not only as a search model, but there's also a lot of reasoning models behind it. So depending on which model you call, you can ask it to either go and search or search and analyze. So this is the model which I'm using. And here, just to show you the interface in the chat, this is roughly the prompt. Obviously the prompt in the bots are quite a bit more advanced than this, but this is kind of a very summarized version of what I'm asking it. So pretty much based on the publicly available news the last 24 hours, look at the current market sentiment for the DAX and provide a sentiment rating on a scale from -10 to 10. I also add a system prompt just to give it some more context, being like, hey, you're an analyst specialized in sentiment analysis. You should essentially approach this problem with that context. And as you can see here, based on this prompt, it goes and pulls a lot of recent news, where it looks at macro data, central bank policy. It also looks at some of the various particular stocks. So here it would look at Mercedes-Benz, Porsche, BMW to see effectively what is happening. And in this particular prompt, I don't think it pulled from Trump's Truth, but in some of the other ones which I've done, it did do that. So effectively it goes and reads the news, it pulls up a bunch of different articles which you can see here, and it then goes and scans those, and it comes up here with an ultimate sentiment analysis score of +2, which is cautiously bullish. And this is actually the free prompt, but if you use, in my bots, I use the paid versions because I have an API key, and those bots are actually even more accurate. So now let's hop over to MT5 to show you guys how this would actually work. So I have this little script here called Perplexity Sentiment Analyzer v3, but effectively it's just a test of a function which is also embedded in some of our expert advisors. And as you can see here right now, it says slightly bullish. And what I did is I just dragged this onto the chart and it did its API keys. And what I currently have baked in here is it first tries using a reasoning model. And the issue with reasoning models is because they output so much text and they don't output consistent text, it's very hard for MetaTrader to always parse through it perfectly to extract the sentiment analysis ratio. So it will first try using a reasoning model, and quite often it actually does successfully return a score, but sometimes it just takes too long, or it doesn't necessarily clearly write a score. So if it doesn't do that, which in this case was the case, it then reverts to just the pro model, which is the normal search model, and that one is extremely robust, so it will then get the score. So here you can see, for instance, it tried a few times. It received a response back from the API, and then it went and it extracted the explanation, and when it extracted the score. And the exact explanation here, I copy and pasted it in a little text box here, so we can see that, like, despite recent volatility and concerns over new US tariffs in the EU, the DAX remains in a bullish trend with strong year-to-date gains and ongoing buy-the-dip sentiment. So it's saying, like, hey, I'm slightly bullish based on the fact that we think that the truth was not really the end of the world, and there likely will be a push to the upside. So based on that, it takes a score, and this score can then be used to filter out trades in some different trading strategies. And specifically, the strategy which I'm using here is our German Longbow Expert Advisor, but I also have the same thing for our Longbow Fund Expert Advisor, and I have a couple in development, one which trades the Nikkei and one which is on Bitcoin. And effectively, all of these bots buy at the open, sell at the close, and typically the trigger is based on either commitment of traders report data, or it's based on options put-call ratio data. And effectively, that is the underlying strategy which can be back tested and has a very good long-term edge. However, in addition to that, I'm giving users the option of having a sentiment analysis filter on top. The issue with any sort of large language model is you can't back test it. So effectively what you can do is you can forward test it on top of an existing really good strategy. Because if you know that, hey, using the commitment of traders reports along with a longbow style of buy at the open, sell at the close with good risk control, that has a very strong long-term edge. Maybe on some of your prop firm accounts, you can also run a sentiment analysis filter so that you take slightly different trades and you're even a little bit more selective. So that's effectively what I'm doing. And this is part of our prop firm bundle, because then people are able to run several bots with some different variation between them. So let's say, for instance, on 2-3 different prop firm accounts, you are running Longbow Fund Manager without a sentiment analysis filter. On 2-3 other ones, you can run it with a sentiment analysis filter. And maybe on some you will use Sonar Reasoning, on some you will use Sonar Normal, on some you can use maybe a different search model to effectively give people a bit of variation between their different prop firm accounts. So this was just a video to show you guys an example of a great example of how you could really use AI. I personally think one of the biggest applications for AI in trading is to be able to crunch data. And here it's crunching hundreds and hundreds of news articles and giving us a score automatically and in the context of an expert advisor. And then you take that score and you use that analysis and you couple it with an existing really good trading strategy to actually use AI in a perfectly legitimate, very strong way to further enhance a really good existing trading strategy. So guys, if you're interested in this, please click the link in the description to check out the Prop Firm bundle, and leave me a comment if you have any questions. Take care.